and welcome to Ephemera. I'm fantasy author Katie Brisky.
New Ephemera is an award-nominated series chaired by Katie and myself. I'm sorry, I was muted there.
Pre-COVID, we held events in the Glad Day bookshop, and while we await our triumphant return, we find ourselves in good humor with friends like you here on YouTube. And we'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that the land on which I live and work is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. This land is covered under Treaty 13 and is part of the Dish with One Spoon.
And the land on which I live and work is situated upon the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, and is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. Additionally, this land is covered by the Between the Lakes Purchase 1792 between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. At Ephemera, we usually try to connect our land acknowledgement with our theme. When I approach them, I like to take in the news, pay attention to what Indigenous organizers and leaders are dealing with and speaking about, and think on the theme that we're trying to embody that month. I try to hold all these things close, reflect on them, speak from my heart, and take an insight action when I can. I find that difficult to do with today's theme, humor. Many people across Turtle Island are expressing fatigue with the news of residential schools. It could be all too easy to prescribe something like humor as a way of coping, of distracting us from the grim realities of the world. And humor can be a powerful tool used to deal with difficult situations. But it can also be a tool of deflection, a way of taking distance from things and avoiding harsh truths. As a white settler, I'm in no position to counsel Indigenous communities on coping mechanisms, but I can speak to other settlers across Turtle Island. Survivors of the residential school system have been telling us about the deaths and disappearances of their children within the system for decades. Recent news of burial sites should be no shock, yet for many of us it is. We must acknowledge that we were taught an incomplete history curated to stifle a record of murder and abuse, often at institutions named in the honor of the people who were enacting that abuse. I urge settlers like myself not to look away in this moment, not to treat each uncovering of a horrible truth as just another story before changing the channel, not to turn from the shame that we all feel as settlers at Canada's hateful colonial legacy and at our privileged and complicit place within it. Shame festers. That's what shame does. It feeds on itself. We instinctively want to close ourselves off from the wrongs that we've done, shy away from them, deflect, but we can't. This only leads to suppression of hard truths, obfuscation, and ultimately more oppression. We must take care of ourselves, but we must also look the complete and violent history of this country in its ugly eye. We have to read about it, teach it, and collectively say no more.
And a reminder to everyone that our code of conduct is posted online. If this is your first event, please check it out on Twitter or Facebook. And if you're so inclined, you can still feed Fred the physically distanced donation dragon. You can find the link to our Ko-fi at the top of our channel near our banner. You'll see a little icon on our Twitter or on the Facebook page for tonight's event. Or you can go to ko-fi.com/ephemera reading series.
So, how's Prancy this month?
Hi, good and chipper as far as I know.
Oh, huh. Really? How about Fred? Plantington III? It just seems like it's always something.
Not this month. You can't overuse a good narrative device, you know.
Oh, yeah, great. So,
But look what I got! It's a laughometer!
Oh, a laughometer.
Yes, the more we laugh, the higher it goes.
I can see that. Awesome. Maybe we should see if we can fill it up by the end of the night.
How did you guess?
I'm an editor. Guessing narrative devices is my job.
Well, I bet you didn't guess it's time to introduce our first reader.
Oh, actually, I did.
Well, Kari Maaren is a writer, cartoonist, musician, and academic whose first novel, the YA fantasy Weave a Circle Round, was published by Tor Books in 2017. It tied for the 2018 Copper Cylinder Award, YA category, was a finalist for the Andre Norton Award for Young Adult Science Fiction and Fantasy, and was shortlisted for the Sunburst Award, YA category. Kari has a completed webcomic, West of Bathurst, and an active one, the Aurora-winning It Never Rains, and she has produced 2 independent albums, Beowulf Pulled My Arm Off and Everybody Hates Elves. She lives in Toronto with too many musical instruments and an astounding number of books. Welcome. I'm afraid you're muted, though.
I am muted, but I am not muted now. I was muted. The muting is over. Thank you. Thank you, Katie, for the introduction. Now I will say things that probably don't make any sense. So I am going to read to you from a novel I'm working on right now, which is a ridiculous thing for me to do because it is only just finished and it is 200,000 words long, which it shouldn't be. It should not be 200,000 words long. I want it to be shorter than that. But anyway, I will read to you from the middle of it, which again is a really dumb thing for me to do because the middle of it will just confuse everybody, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I will give you a little bit of information to help you with the confusion, maybe a tiny bit. So what you need to know at this point in the story is that there are 3 people in this scene, but they are in 2 bodies at the moment. So the protagonist, whose name is Cleo, has been body snatched by one of the other characters, Nora, for reasons that are not yet clear. Cleo is not really okay with this, but it's been going on for a few days now, so she's come to terms with it. The 2 of them can communicate with each other by thinking at each other, and sometimes Nora will say something aloud, but the third person who is with them, Petunia, does not know that this is happening. She cannot hear Cleo. She thinks that Cleo is Cleo. Anyway, Petunia is on a quest. Cleo/Nora is tagging along with Petunia's quest. Do not worry about the quest. It's not relevant at the moment. Petunia and Nora are both magic users. Cleo is not, but of course with Nora in her body, she has been doing magic lately. They have been following a fox that is sometimes human. Don't ask. Long story. The fox claims they're going to a magic lake. And they have arrived at the lake, and at the very end of the last chapter, a house falls out of the sky, and thus we begin. It looked like any other house, except that no other house, to Cleo's knowledge, moved through the air like a predatory bird. She seemed to have all the time in the world to observe it. It was small and neat, with a gently peaked roof and clear windows of carefully spelled glass. "Duck," said Nora to Petunia, and popped away. She'd already cast a protection spell on Petunia. From half a mile away along the shore, she and Cleo watched the house, talons extended, bounce off the spell and slew wildly. "Talons extended?" Cleo said, "What is—" "Oh, it lives here. It's feral. It eats everything," said Nora. "We could give it some cheese. It likes cheese." She popped back to the campfire. Petunia said, "What are you doing? Hide!" She had taken refuge behind a tree. Cleo wasn't sure that was wise. The house was coming back around. "No, I need to talk to it," said Nora as the fox whined somewhere behind her. "It gets easily upset." Cleo could see the house more clearly now. It did have talons. They were curled up under it while it flew, but she knew they weren't going to stay that way. Petunia said, "Cleo, get down!" Nora popped away again at what Cleo figured was the very last second. From high up in a tree, Cleo watched as the house pounced on the spot she'd been standing in at the exact moment an enormous bird with wings of flame did the same thing. "I've seen the house before," said Nora as the house and the bird recoiled, then began to circle each other warily. She was standing on a branch, leaning against the tree's trunk. The birds knew. She sounded unconcerned. Cleo knew she wasn't. She could feel Nora's mind calculating and recalculating their odds. "How many creatures live in here?" said Cleo. "Enough. We have to get to Petunia and pop away." Nora shook Cleo's head. "Do you think I meant to end up at the top of a tree? I was aiming for the lake's far shore." The forest is interfering with my magic. Even if Petunia lets us pop her away, we'll probably just end up sitting on the roof of that house. I should have hit Petunia on the head with a rock before I let her drag us here. Oh, hello, computer. Stop making noises at me. She popped again. Petunia turned as Cleo exploded into existence beside her. Where'd you go? Should we get farther into the forest? Could be difficult, said Nora. We've stumbled on the heart of the wood. Petunia's eyes flicked towards where the house and the bird were still circling each other, occasionally emitting cries of challenge. The fiery bird's call was high and shrill, the house's lower, with an ominous rattle to it. It can't be, said Petunia. We're barely at the edge. How many times do I have to... Petunia, this is not a normal forest, I keep saying. Nora jabbed a thumb towards the lake. I should have recognized this place before, but it changes. It also moves around. We'll eventually get away, but we won't find the path again. We've already been taken somewhere else. Watch out! The house had lunged at the bird, which reared, spreading its wings. Flames swept through the trees above their heads. The vegetation didn't catch, but Cleo could feel the heat on her face. Nora touched Petunia on the arm and popped them away. And then Cleo was sinking. The water, shockingly cold, closed over her head. Nora, said Cleo as her body struggled to swim. I know, I was aiming for the island, double bloody foxshite. Cleo had never learned to swim. Nora apparently had. She pulled Cleo to the surface of the water, then turned around in a circle. Cleo didn't understand how she was staying afloat simply by flailing rhythmically. Petunia surfaced not far away. She choked out, Can't swim! Nora lunged at Petunia, touched her arm again, and popped. Cleo felt the pop go wrong. She thought Petunia shot off in one direction and herself in another. She came through in the shallows at the very edge of the lake, somehow standing upright. The water surged about her knees. The house and the bird were nowhere in sight. As she began to shiver, Cleo heard a faint yelp in the distance. Petunia, said Nora, but it was no use. From nowhere, mist descended. She's not here, said Cleo. We popped wrong. You need to go back. If I try, I'll end up at the bottom of the lake. Petunia is going to have to fend for herself until I can figure this out. Nora waded to shore. She'd started a heating spell. The heat was sinking into Cleo's bones, stopping her shivering. Curse all foxes forever, thought Nora. No more pig for our fox. Why did the forest redirect us here? She stood on the gravel beach, dripping. We need to get back. We don't know what's happening, said Cleo. Give me a minute, thought Nora. I can't pop. I don't know where I'll end up. I'll try a fast version of the float propel spell, but I need to warm up first. She pulled Cleo's mirror out of her pocket. The mirror thrummed in Cleo's hand. The vibrations went all the way up her arm and buzzed through her teeth. She'd never felt a mirror do anything like that before. There's magic everywhere here, thought Nora. Something emerged from the lake. It wasn't more than 10 feet from shore. Unless there was some sort of drop-off there were only a couple of feet of water for it to come out of. But it came, and it came, and it kept on coming. It was pointy and shiny and 3 feet long, 3.5. It was... That's a sword, said Nora as the hilt appeared. There was a hand wrapped around the hilt. The sword stopped. The mist seethed around it. In 2 feet of water, a hand held a sword up out of the lake. Nothing happened. Cleo was on her feet. Nora had jumped up without her noticing. They stared together at the sword, which was perfectly still, gleaming even in the mist. An image out of a story, said Cleo. No, said Nora, absolutely not. She set off along the shore. One blinding flash later, Cleo was back on the ground. Nora struggled to a sitting position. What? There was a bang, said Cleo helpfully. I know there was a bang. I was there. All right. That's it. We're getting out of here now. Nora floated up off the ground and cast a propulsion spell. Cleo thought Nora briefly lost consciousness this time. As usual, Cleo didn't. The force slapped her out of the air and back onto the ground. Nora opened Cleo's eyes and moaned. It wants us to take the sword, said Cleo. Nora growled, not taking the sword. Cleo was trying to think. There was a story like this, wasn't there? About some boy or girl who got a sword from a hand in a lake and then went off to slay monsters or win a kingdom or both? Something wants us to be in the story, said Cleo. No, there's no story magic. It's all Petunia. It has to be, said Nora. You can feel Petunia's magic when she's casting it. Does this feel like her? It's wearing a clever disguise, said Nora, and popped. If she'd been hoping to catch whatever was interfering with her magic off guard, she was disappointed. She again came through knee-deep in the water, directly in front of the sword. Close up, it was impressive. Cleo had seen swords in her history books, plus a few in the museum, mostly notched and rusty. The prize of the Rashid the Good Memorial Collection was a curved sword that was supposed to be cursed. A plaque warned sightseers not to open the cabinet or to dance in the sword's presence. The only other usable sword in the museum had been the one Garnet Pearl's daughter had stabbed Malsimian with, and it hadn't been magic at all. This one was. It was longer and thinner than the curved sword, and its blade churned with what looked like inner flame. Something wanted her to take it. No, something needed her to take it. Forget it, said Nora. Not happening. Cleo said, I don't think we're getting out of here if you don't take it. I am not playing into Petunia's delusion about... Nora wound down and just stood there staring at the sword. As she did, Cleo became more aware of the forest at her back. She knew Nora could feel the same magic she could, mainly because the only reason Cleo could feel it was that Nora was in control of her body. Based on how Nora and Lynn and basically everyone had been talking about the forest, Cleo would have expected to feel hostility or even malevolence. Instead, what she felt was... anxiety? Hope? It's as if it's holding its breath and looking at us the way the fox looks at us when it wants some pig. She could almost hear the forest saying, Please? Take the sword, Nora, said Cleo. I won't. Something bad will happen if I do. I don't understand what it's for, said Nora. The forest really, really wants you to take the sword. Ask me if I care. Look, said Cleo, you're trying to help Petunia, aren't you? What if she's right? What if there is story magic? If there is, what's going to happen? After a long, stubborn pause, Nora muttered, There'll be a lot of goddamn stories. And that will mean... It'll mean she'll be in trouble every 5 minutes, and I'll have to rescue her probably with this sword, and curse you, Cleo, Lynn's daughter, and curse James, who I bet you got your teacher voice from, and curse the crazy old bag who... She swallowed the rest of the sentence and snatched the sword from the hand. Cleo almost expected sparkling lights and a little bell going ting. Instead, the hand simply withdrew beneath the surface of the lake. When Nora glanced down, Cleo could see nothing but water and a few tendrils of mist. The end. For now. There's more. There's 189,000 words more, but whatever.
And I bet they're all wonderful. No, Kari, I've always admired your gift for dialogue in that. So that was an awesome excerpt to share. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to hearing from this book.
Woo!
Woo! All right. Well, thank you very much. And I know that you're all very curious about this Laffometer.
Well, let's warm it up. Does anyone have a favorite speculative fiction joke to share? A knock-knock joke about aliens, a pun about ghosts.
Let's see if we can fill the Laffometer to here. Yeah, I bet we can do that. Drop your best joke in the chat. Just remember, we do have a code of conduct, so keep it cool, keep it friendly. We trust you guys.
While we're doing that, we have a surprise for you. Hey, Katie. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Some friends of Ephemera.
Some friends of Ephemera who?
Some friends of Ephemera who went digging into their pasts and unearthed writing by their youthful selves. We've got an array of juvenilia to amuse, astound, and amaze you. Our special thanks to C.L. Clark, Claire Humphrey, and Premi Mohammed, who you will see in just a few moments. Enjoy.
And now we get to see the humor that is me trying to share my screen. Ha ha. Ah. Yes, it works, I think. Oh God.
I don't hear it. I don't hear it.
Wait! Stop!
Wait!
I'm going to do it again. Hold on. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to say share sound. Yeah. That's fine. Apologies to Claire out there in YouTube land. Can we hear it now?
I still don't hear her.
I'm Claire Humphrey.
Wait,
I'm a
I hear her now.
writing my whole life since I learned the alphabet. I got started when I was 6 and decided to write stories about the topic that's dear to every 6-year-old girl's heart, shipwrecks. So this is my first book, The Shipwreck by Claire Humphrey. I dedicated it to my grandma. One day, the ship Lily left port. She was going northwest. A storm came up. The crew was excited. The cook was too, so he forgot about his food. It tipped over. It was burning. The ship did not sink. 2 days later, the ship caught fire again.
Sorry about this, friends. Sorry, Jen, can you hear me or not? No one can hear you. Okay. Yeah, you can play it then. After some technical difficulties.
Hilarious technical difficulties. I am going to try
This
to
is where
share
we
my
need
screen
the screen
instead.
was like the color bar and the robot is falling over. We need Guinness. That's what we need.
Guinness, entertain them, quick.
I see things coming up on your screen. That's probably a good sign. I can tell more deer puns. That's what we'll do.
Hi, I'm Claire.
Okay.
How much does it cost to take Prancy out to dinner? $1. Why didn't the deer like to perform on stage? Because he had stag fright. Should I keep going or can I stop?
Well, I'm going to share my screen over top of my screen and you can... There we go.
Can I tell you one more? Okay, what do you call a deer who has a third antler growing out of his eye socket? Because that's a thing that can happen sometimes.
What is it?
A bad idea.
I invite the people in our Zoom to watch this video on YouTube instead of in the Zoom because it is being very bad in the Zoom. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Claire Humphrey. I am a writer and I've been writing my whole life ever since I learned the alphabet.
Is it going?
I got started when I was 6 and decided to write stories about the topic that's dear to every 6-year-old girl's heart, shipwrecks. So this is my first book, The Shipwreck by Claire Humphrey. I dedicated it to my grandma. One day, the ship Lily left port. She was going northwest. A storm came up. The crew was excited. The cook was too, so he forgot about his food. It tipped over. It was burning. The ship did not sink. 2 days later, the ship caught fire again, this time from electricity. It sank. The end. Here's my illustration during, before, and after this disaster. And you may notice there's something a little bit lacking in this story, namely characters of any kind. So I tried again the following year when I was 7 with a much more interesting epic called The Last Voyage of the Lily May. To understand this story, you need some very advanced seafaring vocabulary, namely a crimp. A crimp is a person whose job it was to ambush unsuspecting people in ports, get them drunk, and convince them to sign on to become sailors. And by the time they woke up in the morning, they'd be so far away from shore that they couldn't change their minds. Polly and Trina looked at the inn before them. They knew that it was a nest of crimps. Anyway, they went in. When they saw how dark it was, they asked for a candle and locked the door. A creak on the stairs startled Trina. A knock on the door. Polly answered it. The door opened and Polly saw a crimp. The crimp grabbed Trina and Polly. He made them sign. Then he took them to a big windjammer. Look at me with my ship vocabulary. They had to stay in the hull with bilge water. Soon, Polly noticed the hull was filling with water. The boat sank. Polly towed Trina to a sandbar and they went home. The end. Clearly, once I got to the shipwreck, there was no point in continuing because that story was already the best it could possibly be. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Premi Mohammed. I'm a speculative fiction author based in Edmonton, Alberta. My debut novel, Beneath the Rising, came out in 2020. The sequel came out this March, and I have a couple more books coming out this year, including The Annual Migration of Clouds from ECW Press. So, this little piece of juvenilia, I'm not 100% sure of the date. It looks like about high school because I was often using these little notebooks back then, so I would have been about 14 or so. And this is an early version of some musing, I guess, that I was doing about the city that I used to dream of a lot, and whether or not I could incorporate it into the novel that I was just deciding whether I wanted to work on or not. Johnny still doubts that the dreamery is real. That is, she still doubts that dreams are not mere random images thrown up by the mind. Nick, of course, knows that dreams come from a real place, which is why there are such things as nightmares. It is possible to see things that the devil has seen, but the dreamer has not. Now, I personally am with Johnny on this one, which is why the houses I see so often in my dreams worry me. If I were with Nick, I would not be worried at all. The houses seem alarmingly real. They seem like a place. And even the navy sky and the two bright stars above their roofs, the fall streets outside rustling sparsely with russet leaves, the street itself and the parked old cars, all these seem real. And more than real, they have become associated with real and powerful emotions, awe and love. They are too tall and narrow to be real houses, and no real houses have that dark brown red brick and deep green roofing tile. Connected with walkways made of deep chocolate wood, even the walkways lined with books, as are all the towering shelves glittering in the friendly firelight. There are ladders everywhere, part of a set with the wooden shelves and catwalks and railings, but it is not chaos any more than a library is chaos. The outer walls are like one big window, interspersed with supportive rows, not frequent, of brick, and given the fast fall wind outside, the trees and their scurrying leaves, and the shiny Fords and Rolls, their backs like beetles, it should be empty, but it's bustling. Every house bustles with laughing people, red-cheeked, indulgent. I have been there. It is familiar to me. The connection between the houses is the important part. Thank you for listening.
Hi everyone, my name is C.L. Clark. I'm a friend of Ephemera and the author of The Unbroken and numerous short stories, including the gem I'm about to read from today. One of my very first forays into authordom, I wrote the first draft of More Than a Sword when I was 13. I rewrote it again a year later when I realized I was queer. If you listen closely, you'll likely hear influences from The Wheel of Time, the Dragonlance Chronicles, the Forgotten Realms series like Drizzt Do'Urden, and more. I think you'll also find it to be very on brand. More Than a Sword. I don't want to ride another bloody horse as long as I flaming live, moaned disgruntled Andra as she clambered off of her horse. Nor me, Maaren agreed. I'm bloody saddle sore. That's too bad, Ataran said, laughing. You'll be back on them again tomorrow, just after dawn. Andra watched as the lean young man dismounted much more gracefully than she had. Why so early? Andra asked, over Maeren's groan. You know my da, Ataran answered with a shrug. He probably wouldn't stop at all if the horses didn't need the rest. I think I'll take my chances walking, muttered Maaren. Andra and Ataran laughed. The three friends started unloading their horses. Andra's roan stallion kept pushing Ataran as Andra removed its load. Leave off, Atarn yelled as the roan bit his collar. "I say, leave off!" Andra was laughing so hard that she could barely hold her saddlebags, and only the supporting arm of an equally amused Maaren kept Andra on her feet. Even Maeren's braid seemed to be laughing as it swung back and forth over her shoulders. The scene was starting to draw a crowd when Andra could finally spare enough breath to say, "He wants your apple." Andra pointed to the shiny red apple Atarn had been eating. Atarn broke off. There was no point in arguing. "Your horse is too smart for its horseshoes," he said, exasperated. Then he fed the roan the apple. The crowd began to disperse, the soldiers chuckling as they went back to their individual duties. Andra was disappointed as she felt Maeren's arm slide off her shoulders. Andra knew it was necessary, though, lest it be seen as more than genial. After the chaos had subsided, Andra asked, "Where are we, exactly?" Andra had never been very good with maps or directions. "We have been traveling east since dawn, keeping the forest on our left," Maaren said, making a sweeping gesture that included the expanse of woods, "so we should be in the Black Hills." Andra looked west, back the way they had come, her brown, almond-shaped orb squinting in the sunset. The land seemed indeed to be nothing but crests and valleys. It only seemed to level out near the forest. Andra realized that the forest would have to be the Black Forest. It was lost to her, however, why the hills were called the Black Hills. They were a lush green right now, in the peak of spring.
We're back and I'm not muted. We're 2 for 2 now. This is the best. And so thank you very much to Claire and C.L. Clark and Premu Muhammad. And also, during all of that, look at the Laugh-O-Meter.
Wow.
It's gotten so high. I saw some great jokes go by. I think they definitely tickled Prancy's funny bone. It's a pun. I'm funny. You might even say humorous.
Humorous, right? Yeah, humorous.
It's funny.
Well,
I guess we should keep filling up this Laugh-O-Meter.
I guess we should. Wow, there it goes. Oh.
Yeah, so our authors tonight, I'll weave a wicked good laugh into their prose. So what other humorous SFF books have you enjoyed?
We need your recommendations if you'd like to drop them in chat or on Twitter.
And I'm very pleased to introduce our next reader. Marie Bilodeau is an SFF author, professional storyteller, and collector of Masters of the Universe action figures. She loves a good, glittery adventure and currently lives in Ottawa, Canada, with an enthusiastic baker, 4 cats, and many unicorns. Many, many unicorns. She's also co-chair of Ottawa's SpecFitCon, CanCon, where she weaponizes her glitter cannon at will. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with some of my figures. I'm kidding. So today, instead of reading, I'm just going to show you my entire collection. Okay, I hope you've got about 3 hours. We're going to go through it. Okay, it's going to be great. I was told I should tell a deer pun. I'm not going to though, because I'm afraid that Kari might reach through the screen and get me. But I am very excited to be here. Thank you for welcoming me. And today I will be reading from Hellbound, the 3rd book in the Guild of Shadows series. Now it's a 3rd book, so I thought maybe I'll read from the 1st or the 2nd book, and I thought, no, this one just came out. The basic premise of the Guild of Shadows series, this is very low spoiler. 20 years ago, there were all of these babies vanished out of their cribs. Think like the changelings, the old stories where people would come and find that it was a different child in their crib. That's what happened, but across the world, millions and millions of children gone, replaced by these weird alien things. So people thought they're from another world. And then as they got older, they developed powers. It got really freaky. Nobody was into it. So they decided to call these beings, these children, traded, and they then decided to shunt them into whatever useful skills they could have, because you certainly can't have people with powers to be free. So Tiramisu is the main protagonist here. It is from her point of view, and right now she is on a mission for the Guild of Shadows. I figure at this point, if you could like follow Kari, which you all did lovingly from the chat, when she went to the middle of the book with like three characters to two bodies, I'm good. I'm just going to jump right in. That's all you're getting. Considering the glittering dresses and shiny decorations, both distracting my senses and challenging my ability to keep my shadows wrapped around me, it was a miracle I even spotted the dart before it struck the ambassador. The real sucky part? The only way to stop the ambassador from being struck was to throw myself in front of it. Not like I had a whole lot of time to plan against a projectile. I just hoped my armor would be enough to stop it. A sharp pain webbed out from my shoulder and heat shot down my arm and wrapped around my chest. Well, that didn't work. I stumbled forward, unable to stop my momentum or that of the quickly creeping poison, and crashed into the ambassador, my shadows wrapping around him, which meant he could see me. Definitely not great. His eyes grew wide at the sight of the purple demon girl who just appeared beside him. Usually, I'd be mortified, but right now, I was getting so damn loopy from the poison surging through my system that I actually considered hugging him. I managed to retain some dignity. "Hey," I said, grinning and slipping past him. I barely even cared about how mystified he looked. Did I just do that? Being seen by humans was a big no-no. I was on a mission to protect the ambassador and his daughter. Other Guild of Shadows operatives weren't far, but I was the only one with the powers to hide in plain sight. Unless I got too close to humans, of course. I stumbled past another human as the ambassador shouted in alarm. Smooth, Tira. A dark tunnel began collapsing around my vision. My shadows pulsated, trying to dissipate as my concentration slipped. Sweat trickled down my neck as I forced them to stay and protect me. Dame Zalir would have my ass if I didn't move out of the human's way before I reappeared completely. My heartbeat drummed in my ears, my shadows pulsing with every step as humans scrambled around me. Tira, what the hell is going on? Gorcel's rough voice boomed in my earpiece, threatening to split my skull in two. I leaned against a cool, smooth wall. Nice. Except for the wallpaper, all peach and gold in a busy pattern that made my eyes cross. I poked it, my shadows dancing frantically at the very small part of me that was still mostly undrugged, struggled to keep them up. Humans screamed and generally panicked, but thankfully they all managed to avoid me. For now, anyway. Tira! He screamed. I didn't like Gorcel. He was my new main partner, a large, gruff man who just happened to be made of rocks and who could turn into a boulder, often a hairy boulder. As far as I knew, that was his only power. Why the hell would they have selected someone who could turn into rocks for the Guild of Shadows? That wasn't a stealthy power. Not like my shadows, I mumbled out loud without realizing, until Gorcel replied, "What the hell is going on in there?" "All right, we were supposed to protect the ambassador. Well, I'd done my part. Gorcel could take it from here." "Attack on ambassador," I said around my thick tongue. "Dart," I managed to spit out, though my mouth didn't move quite right. Why couldn't I feel my lips? Oh, was this thing going to kill me? Oh, I hadn't really considered that. Oh, I suppose since we were protecting the ambassador from assassins, that made all sorts of sense. The light in the room grew as the din increased, and I navigated the wall, carefully following the psychedelic peach and gold pattern. Walls usually led to doors, right? Take a tridentolin shot and get back in the game, Tira. I tried to say screw you, but I only managed to gurgle. Stupid tridentolin. basically hopped up adrenaline shots for treated like me, so we could keep fighting when all we really wanted to do was nap. Ian would have come up with a solid plan, not just screamed at me to pump myself full of shit. Ian. My shadows dropped around me for a microsecond before I managed to refocus. I didn't care about the ambassador. I wasn't even sure that I cared about the Guild of Shadows. But I cared about Ian. And I couldn't save him unless I stayed in the game, as Gorcel so annoyingly put it. Fine, I mumbled, focusing on that damned wall, where the colors now danced, imagining golden ducks carrying peaches in their mouths. Oh, that's kind of cute. And suddenly, an opening. Finally, I almost cried with relief that the door stood ajar, not certain I could navigate a doorknob right now. I tried to maintain momentum around the corner, but the door kept moving back as I leaned against it, and I stumbled down, rolling until I landed on soft, plush carpeting. This is nice. I stared up at the ceiling, the sparkling chandelier blinding me. My shadows trembled, afraid of the light. I'd lose them any second. I was barely able to keep my eyes open. Not that it mattered, since I was pretty sure from my ragged breathing that I'd be dead too. I hate this shit, I thought as I reached with a numb finger for the infinity symbol on my left shoulder. I could barely feel the slight indentations etched in my armor. Apparently, the designers had foreseen this particular issue, and my fumbling triggered a bioscan. A single chirp through my earpiece indicated the incoming needle. I really hate this. I had just enough time to think before it plunged into my heart, making me scream and sit up. The dark tunnel collapsed and my vision exploded outward into light. My limbs electrified, and not at all in a pleasant way, as every sense went into overdrive. The air tasted of ash, my breathing hurt, and everything was entirely too shiny. Especially the face of the woman staring at me, wide-eyed. Whoops, I dropped my shadows. Despite repeated practice with this tridentulin stuff, which sucked just as badly as it sounds, I still couldn't keep my shadows wrapped around me. Are you? The woman started to say. I cut her off, my hyper-driven senses spotting the centipede-like intruder crawling on the ceiling. Down! I leapt over her as she dropped, either because of my order or because of the purple demon now leaping toward her, pulled out my thin blade and plunged it into the creature on the ceiling. A jet of green goo exploded from its gross. So gross. Some of the splatter landing on my arm and sizzling through the fabric. Shit, shit, shit. I grabbed the sleeve and pulled it off, just as the acid disintegrated the rest of it. Damn it, I like that shirt. My feet connected with the ground and I pushed myself back up as I turned. But the creature had already fallen. It twitched as it bore a hole in the floor. Gross. I checked the cryo pellet at it, ice forming around its many, many twitching legs, containing the acid damage. A quick scan revealed no other enemies, at least not in the immediate vicinity. Stay here, I turned to the woman. She had the decency to just nod and not scream at me, wide eyes betraying her deep shock. Yeah, I guess she was having a bad day. Well, she wasn't the only one. I pulled my shadows back around me. They protested, throbbing and twitching as the adrenaline made it hard for me to do anything but run. So I ran as I held them close. The next room had been emptied out. The other guild operatives would be keeping the ambassador safe. My job had been to stop an attack in the ballroom. Yay for shadow powers. Their job was to make sure he survived any subsequent attack. Technically, I was done, but I was so full of tridentulin and Gorcel's annoying scream to get back in the game that I just kept running, right to the back of the cavernous ballroom where I thought the dart had originated from. No sign of anyone, so I kept running, struggling to keep my shadows around me. I burst into the back room where the staff scurried around to get the meal prepared. I jumped up and grabbed the ceiling to avoid several servers before dropping back down, barely missing a beat. And still, I kept running. Shit, I hated this stuff. I wanted it out of my system. If I couldn't find someone else to fight, I'd damn well run it off. I headed for the main doors, not too worried about attacks. An invisible running demon would be hard to dart. Again. Tira, report, Gorcel said, and I ignored him, running around another corner. Maybe I could go outside and do loops around the place. But it wasn't sunset yet, and drawing shadows from every blade of grass and stone would require so much attention. I didn't care enough to follow through that logic, and I headed for the staff doors. I would have reached them, too, Had a giant fuzzy boulder not rolled into my path at the last second. Before I could swerve, I slammed right into it and flew against the wall, crumpling to the ground. Man, you suck at adrenaline, Gorsel said as he shaped back into his man form. You just suck, I wanted to say, but the impact had shocked me out of my adrenaline rush and, between being poisoned and shot up, I was getting pretty sleepy. Come on, he sighed and threw me over his shoulder. I'd have complained if I hadn't been so busy taking a nap.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm entirely unsurprised that there was glitter in the very first sentence that you read.
It's one of my life goals to just meet expectations and then surpass them with more glitter.
I was going to say, exceeding them. Well, thank you for bringing your wonderful, bright, glittery presents to Ephemera.
Thanks for having me.
And I think it probably contributed to our laugh-o-meter.
Wow.
Look how high it is now.
So high. We had lots of great recs in the chat too. Pratchett, Martha Wells, Douglas Adams, Curtis C. Jen, another friend of Ephemera. But I think to get it to the top, we need a final burst of laughter. Oh, humorous. I get it, like the bone. Okay, you're funny. You're funny. Say, Katie, do you have any juvenilia?
Oh my, yes. Let's see. I have an epic ferret fantasy. I have an epic wolf adventure story with illustrations. And I have some angsty teenage poetry from the time I thought I was Emily Bronte.
Is that also epic?
I mean,
I bet it is.
It's trying to be epic.
How can we possibly choose between those?
Well, you and I won't. The audience will. It's up to you. Do you want epic ferrets, epic wolves with illustrations, or teenage angst, also fairly epic? You can vote in the chat or on Twitter.
And while you do that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our final reader tonight. Mur Lafferty is a Hugo Award-winning podcaster, writer, I should know how to say that, streamer, and editor. Her books have been nominated for the Hugo, Nebula, Philip K. Dick, Manly Wade Wellman, and Scribe Awards, and she's been inducted into the Podcaster Academy Hall of Fame. Mur? Wait, you are muted. Oh,
yeah, that was my great opening. I'm muted. So I have no puns. Katie should have known that before she invited me on, because I'm allergic to them. But I do have a short story that I've been working on that's a bit of a parody because I've been playing a lot of Hades lately. So this story is called Crates. It was a dark and stormy night. Jazz had fallen asleep over her workbench, exhausted after doing hours of intricate carving work on an ornate chest. It was a lot of work, but Mom always said these would be treasured, would become heirlooms. And all she knew now was she had a stiff neck and sore fingers. It took a moment, but she realized someone was there at the door, not Thunder. She got up from her workbench and opened the door. Sorry. Outside stood an old man in a cape. Of course it was an old man in a cape, because no one normal would ever come to your door in weather like this, unless they were cursed children or old men who wanted a lot of favors. This old man had brown skin and a long white beard. He didn't greet her or introduce himself, just pushed past her to come inside. Finally, he grumbled, I've waited a long time for this. I was asleep. How long were you knocking? She asked, wiping the water off her shoulder. He shook his head, his wide hat spraying water around her dining room. He tilted his hat up and regarded her with gleaming silver eyes. No, I mean, I waited 7 weeks for the proper stormy evening to come visit you. 7 weeks? I guess whatever you want isn't that important, she said, then grunted as he threw his sodden cape at her. The man drew himself up to his full height, which was a few inches taller than Jazz. It is of the greatest importance. We are in need, he paused dramatically, of a chosen one. She held her hand up. It can't be me, no. We were DNA tested for magic. Who are you anyway? I am Gareth of Gromley. She frowned. Gromley? Where's that? He waved his hand as if it didn't matter. A great darkness is coming, and prophecy says only one person can defeat it. Then go find them and stop bothering normal people in the middle of the night. He ignored her and stared pensively into the fire. He had to have spent hours working on this pensive stare. It was impressive. But he broke his majestic profile to face her, scowling. The chosen one is a refugee from a neighboring land. They will come here, have adventures, and face the great darkness. They will save us all. If you're so excited for them, why are you here dripping on my floor and messing up my furniture? She said, throwing the cape back to him. He let it fall to the floor. The chosen one can't do their job alone. They will need to travel the countryside, perhaps the cities. They will be low on resources and need to find treasure in the oddest of places. The only problem is, someone must place this treasure. If someone doesn't put weapons, armor, money, and magical potions in many of the out-of-the-way places, the chosen one will not be able to get any loot. And without loot, we cannot save the world. Loot. She'd heard the word before. The way her mother had said it, Jazz had thought it was a dirty word. Loot was what people got out of chests. And the worst part, even though the chest was easily opened on beautifully oiled hinges, what people did was destroy the chest instead of just opening it. 3 hits with a sword, then treasure, and then they were off, leaving days of fine work destroyed in their wake. That is what loot was, an excuse to destroy her family's hard work. And you want what from me then? She asked. You want to buy my chests? No, Gareth said. We need something more from you. Someone has to put the treasure into these chests, crates, and so on. You are that someone. Hang on. You want me to travel the countryside and probably a city or two, he reminded her. And probably a city or two, putting treasure into chests and crates and barrels. Urns are good too, he said. They're satisfying when they break. Of course they are, she said. She could hear her mother spinning in her grave. And I do this for someone else to come along and find the treasure. Why not just give it to the hero for them to use from the start? Because that's not how it's done, the old Gromley man cried. The hero will start out largely untested, so if you give them a battle axe +1 on their first day, then they won't know what to do with it. They have to start with a knife and ripped trousers before they can get the flaming longsword and golden armor. Golden armor, she said, nodding. Right, I know where to get that. Simple. She thought, more and more logistical problems cropping up like weeds. But if the hero hasn't been through the countryside, then won't these places still be thick with bears and wolves and bandits and that coming darkness thing? If I'm carting weapons around just to drop them off, how do I stay alive? Like this, he said gallantly, and picked the cape off the floor and threw it at her again. The fabric hit her straight in the face. She pulled it around her shoulders, grimacing at the cold, wet wool blend. And, this is Infinigon, my invisibility cape. If you wear Infinigon, you will disappear. I'm still here, she said, waving her hand in front of her face. And you weren't invisible when you got here. He looked uncomfortably at the fire. The pensive look had turned awkward. It only works when it's dry. So you want me to travel the dangerous countryside, leaving items and crates and chests and urns and stuff, stay hidden, and only when the weather's good, she asked, trying to get this information through her head. Well, you need to do it in any weather, he said. The deadline's coming up for the chosen one to join us. So what's my reward in all of this? If I'm doing a lot of work for someone else to take all the credit, while I'm dead of a midnight bear attack in the rain. We'll probably make a monument of you in that place, he said helpfully. You can haunt it and give out a quest to next generation's hero. So there's no reward. What's stopping me from just taking a weapon and hiding in my house under your cape until the darkness passes? We're hoping for you to help out of the goodness of your heart, and you could get a lot of good marketing for your family's workmanship. The workmanship shattered by a morning star? That's not a selling point. Easily destroyed by burly heroes. He sighed and stood up a little straighter, irritation on his face making him look more like Carl the Butcher than Gareth of Gromley. Fine, what do you want? If there's anything her parents taught her beyond wood carving, it was haggling. Jazz and Gareth talked into the night, finally agreeing to a modest wage, per diem, and monetary help when buying magical weapons. The morning night light started to peek through the windows, illuminating the coffee mugs. Gareth pushed a signed contract across the table. Are you satisfied? She yawned. Mostly. When do I start? The hero will be on a boat that lands in Grimdark in 2 days' time. You will need to be well in front of them so they can get their starting money and find items hidden in the city. Also health potions. Here's a bank account number. Get some starting cash and buy a few basic weapons. Maybe buy one really nice one, but hide it inside somewhere really scary like a bandit's vault. How am I supposed to get inside a bandit's vault? She demanded. Why can't your hero take the bandit's loot then? That's not my problem. That's why I'm paying you, he said. He winced at the sunlight, pulled his hat low over his face so all Jazz could see was the gray beard and gray robes. Is it too much to ask for a good storm? What happens if I get into trouble? She asked and opened the door for him. That's also on you to fix. I have to go. I have to visit a farmer and convince her to stop growing food and focus only on healing herbs, he said. The hero will need many potions. He turned his back and strode down the road, hand on his head as if he were imagining wind and rain threatening to tear it off. Jazz dozed in her mother's chair and then woke. She'd dreamt of opening her mother's hope chest, seeing darkness pour out, cover the floor, fill the room, and drown her and everyone she'd ever loved. The darkness, right. She had always wanted to travel, and this was an interesting excuse. She wondered if she could find folks to help her. She wasn't setting off on an adventure, because she wasn't a hero, but it might be interesting anyway. And that was part 1.
I will never again look at a crate, a barrel, or an urn the same way again.
I've just been very concerned about all the people who carve those beautiful urns in Hades that I just blow through.
And I never really thought, who put the treasure and the loot in those places. But obviously someone has to.
Someone has to. And they're pretty bitter about it too.
Apparently.
Yeah.
Well, and that actually pushed the laugh-o-meter up even higher. We're almost at the top. I'm sure one more push can get us there. So what's the verdict?
The audience demands ferrets. Angsty ferrets specifically.
And I know we had a request on Twitter for angsty teenage ferrets. It's me. It's going to be angsty. So this is my untitled ferret fic that I wrote when I was about 11. It is blatantly a ripoff of Tail Chaser's song. So I'm really sorry, Tad Williams. In this folder, actually, it says, do not read contents. That means you. But we're going to ignore that and begin reading. We're actually going to skip a bit. Okay, so our hero, who's a ferret, named Sky Song, is right now sharing a meal with her friend before the ferret festival that happens. After eating half of the robin, Sky Song hurried to the meeting rock. It was a fine thing to be a ferret at Rodance. Rodance was a ferret celebration. It was held every full moon. There was food, dancing, stories, songs, and all the pups who were old enough got their paw name. I'm really sorry, Tad Williams. The meeting rock was a large black boulder by the rushing stream. Majestic chestnut and leafy maple trees offered shade and a sense of peace to the meeting rock. Sky Song noticed that the elders on the stone were preparing to talk. She hurriedly found a spot on the silky grass beside Paw Gentle, her friend. The main elder, Grand Fur, cleared his throat. Welcome, ferrets. We will begin Rodance with the story of Nutlegs. And as much fun as I'm sure that the story of Nutlegs would be, I'd actually now like to skip to the very end. So Sky Song has gone on a quest of sorts, and she's in the woods with her friend Stripehide, and they've had adventures. They were briefly separated, and this is their reunion. Within minutes, Sky Song and Stripehide were having a joyful reunion in between two roots of a great tree. After recounting their adventures, Stripehide had some rather stunning news. And that's the end. That's all I wrote. And I don't know what the stunning news was meant to be. So you can imagine it. Maybe it had to do with nut legs. I don't know. But yes, that was epic, angsty ferrets. Thank you. Oh, we broke it. I just absolutely broke it with that last round of laughs. And I'm really proud of you. As we close out tonight, we'd also like to thank our fabulous readers and friends of Ephemera for contributing their juvenilia, our composer, Alex White, our friends, families, loved ones, and you. Thank you for staying with us. We'll see you next on August 18th, right here on YouTube.